welcome. Welcome to our latest edition of Get to Know Our Managers. So I'll give a little background. It's been a while since we've done this. I'll give a little refresher. I'd say probably 3 years ago, I was approached by a resident that said, we have new managers come on board at the community and also at the corporate office. And sometimes we have a hard time getting to know that individual. And wouldn't it be great if there was some mechanism to do that? And so as we started talking, I said, what about if we videotape this and we can get it out to the masses? And so the idea of this was really a genesis of that conversation with the resident, and we thought we would keep moving that forward. So you will see that from the executive directors, you'll see it from myself as we introduce you to the team. The idea of this is strictly fun. So a lot of it's personal, some of it's about work, but nothing too deep. So we want to keep you informed and entertained, but this is really to get to know the person. So hopefully you enjoy our afternoon here. So again, we have Lisa Pearre. Lisa Pearre is our Vice President of Marketing, and she works over at our Main Street office here in Westminster. So
Hi there.
We're going to jump right into it. So start with the softball. Please tell us about your family.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, hi everyone. I'm really excited to be here. Hopefully this is entertaining and you keep watching to the end. My family, my husband Austin, we've been married for, it's been over 23 years now, so quite a little stint there. And I have a stepson who is 30, and his name's Forrest. And I have 2 kids of our own. My son Colin is 18 and my daughter Lindsay is 15. So we are busy with high school. We are busy with college search right now, which is very exciting. So it's wonderful. I actually grew up in South Jersey. So I still have family up there, my parents, my sister. I have a brother in Colorado, but they all get to come and see us down here in Maryland. And we have my husband's family's from Frederick, so we do have our local connection there.
So tell us a little bit more about the kids and some of the college search and
Absolutely.
Things that they're into.
Yes. So my son Colin plays baseball. Okay. That's his big claim to fame. We actually are in the Brunswick, Maryland high school district. Not to get too specific, but the high school baseball team just won the Division 1A state championship in 2024, which is very exciting. So my son Colin was on that team. So he's big into baseball, also plays golf, basketball, kind of a well-rounded athlete and student, really strong student as well. So we've been, looking at, he wants to play baseball in college, obviously wants to get a good education, so we're looking at Maryland schools, some that aren't too terribly far away, as well in Pennsylvania and Virginia. So that's been a big process. We did this a dozen years ago with my stepson, and so you think like, hey, this, it's like riding a bike, get back on, but it's a whole, new process in some ways, and having the sports aspect is a bit of an added facet to it, which is exciting. So
do you have a preference if he stays close or goes away?
It's interesting. I mean, we certainly like the idea of being able to see his baseball games, but a lot of the schools, they stream things for families, which is really exciting. And I myself went to college about 2.5 hours away from where I grew up, which I thought was nice. It was still pretty close in case there was any sort of emergency, but it was far enough away that I really was able to kind of spread my wings and sort of get a kind of a change and sort of that growth in the development. And that honestly is what I'm really hoping for my son as well. So we're looking at some schools that are a little bit closer and a little bit, no more than really 2.5 to 3 hours. Okay. So, so still relatively close in the grand scheme of things, no kind of West Coast or west of the Mississippi type of stuff. So
yeah, he's a short timer for high school.
Yes.
Does he have spring fever? I know we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, I think he's getting a little bit of the senioritis that they say, but got another semester to go, and of course baseball season's coming up. Golf season was in the fall. That was strong. That was exciting. Now and here in a couple months we'll be starting up the baseball season again, and that should be interesting, because I think in the spring with a lot of the baseball players, the colleges kind of take some renewed interest in some cases. So, and he's a pitcher, so that's kind of a big deal. I mean, he's a utility player, but pitching is his big thing. So, so we're excited. He's going to be back out there on the mound this year. So,
how's your daughter feel about being the only child?
Well, it's funny because my husband Austin keeps saying, in a few months, all the attention, all the focus is going to be on you, so you better be ready for it. So I think she's kind of like, well, we'll see when that happens. But she's our, both my kids are really strong academically, but she is just that's kind of her claim to fame is her academics. Which is, a woman after my own heart. But she's also a dancer, and she's danced for the Palms team at the high school, but she also dances for a studio in Frederick, and she's on the competition team and doing a solo for the first time this year. So we're really proud of her. Over the Christmas holiday, the studio got a chance to go and actually perform for an assisted living and memory care that's near us, and it was just such an incredible experience for the students, for the parents that were there. Not ashamed to say that I cried both times that I saw her dance, because it was just really exciting. And I know you've got a dancer in your family too, so you can relate. So.
A solo is a big deal.
It's a big deal.
I know that's a very stressful time for the dancer and for your child.
Yes.
So I'm sure she'll pull it off with
flying
high
colors.
So,
it'll be wonderful. But it's spring is going to be busy, because not only is it baseball season, but it's also dance competition season.
Yeah.
So we've got a few. Luckily, we stay pretty local with some of the competitions. So, but it's gonna be a whirlwind.
For those folks out there that don't know dance and the competitions, someday come grab one of us, and we'll provide you the background. We could bore you to death with it. But it's probably more than you would have ever expected.
Right.
It's quite a bit.
It's been quite an experience for me, because we're relatively new to all of that. But she's also just recently this year started playing field hockey for the high school. A couple of her good friends play on the team. They convinced her to try out. She's really it's a good group of girls. As far as kind of having your tribe.
Mm-hmm.
High school's so hard. I don't know that I'd ever want to repeat it personally, but as many people would. But I think she's really found a really good, kind group of people to surround herself with. So I'm just really happy for her. So
nice.
I think she's succeeded. Both my kids are succeeding in high school far better than I did. So, which is hard this day and age.
So we don't want to leave out your husband.
Yes.
How'd you meet him?
Oh, great question. So I mentioned he's a Frederick native. So his family's been in Frederick for a very long time. And we actually ended up working for the same organization. Farmers and Mechanics Bank, which was a local to Frederick bank. It's part of PNC now, after that tends to happen with the banks. But I was in marketing, he was on the retail side of things. Mutual friends introduced us, and so we just kind of hit it off. He's a little bit older than I am. He already had a son. I was frankly first job out of college, so I mean we kind of just met. We were friends first. A group of us younger kind of people working for the organization would hang out, and so we just started dating. But I was at the bank for about 4 years in the marketing department, and then got an opportunity to go work for the United Way of Frederick County. To be honest, I think my dad was a little bit relieved, because I think he was a little bit not sure about this whole dating somebody that also worked in the same organization. But it's gone back quite a few years, so it was kind of, we weren't in the same department. So
Right.
He liked to kid around and tell people that he worked for me, but that definitely wasn't the case.
So you mentioned that you grew up in Jersey.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about your growing up there, and
Sure.
when did you leave? What age?
Yeah, absolutely. So now kind of going back a little bit further, both of my parents are from North Jersey, and fun fact, they actually went to kindergarten together. Which was kind of crazy. And then my mom's family kind of moved away. I think both my grandmothers sort of kept in touch a little bit, weren't super close, but they reconnected after high school and started dating, and so they ended up together. And my dad went away to college in Texas, which was Texas Western at the time. It's now UTEP. Did college for a few years and then enlisted in the Navy, and was in the submarine service, and before going back and finishing school. But in the midst of all that, they got married, and so they lived in Texas, they lived in Norfolk, Virginia, which is where my dad was stationed. They lived back in Texas, and so then they ended up moving back to New Jersey. They only made it as far as South Jersey. My dad, who got his engineering degree from Texas Western, ended up working for DuPont, which was in the Delaware region. So they ended up settling back in South Jersey. But it's funny because when I graduated from high school, I ended up going to McDaniel right here in Westminster. So we'll come to that probably in a minute. But when I came to Maryland and I told people, I'm from New Jersey, I'd always get two questions. What exit, meaning what exit on the turnpike, and where's your accent? Because I think everybody assumes that being from New Jersey, I'd sound like the people from the Jersey Shore show, or I'd sound like, I come from Philly. And it's funny because yes, when I go back up there, you kind of fall back into some of the, coffee and water and talk and, those types of things. But we never really had an accent. And I think it's just because my parents had been in so many different places that we probably kind of got that blended. And we don't even take the turnpike to go to my parents' house. They're so far South Jersey, we take 295. We're really my parents are 20 minutes from Philadelphia, the historic downtown area. So, which we didn't actually go over there much growing up, but since I've moved to Maryland, my husband and I have gone to either Philadelphia or to the Jersey Shore, because we could deposit the small children with my parents and then go take a couple of day trip and then come back. So don't do that as much anymore because our lives revolve around, our high school students, but it was good at the time.
So I grew up in the South, and later I'll explain how you actually pronounce Norfolk.
Thank you.
Not nearly close, but that's for another day. So tell me about your pets. I know you have at least one. I'm not sure if there's any others.
Right now we have a dog, and we've had, in the past, we've had 2 dogs, we've had 3 cats, but right now we're down to 1 dog, yellow lab. Her name's Bailey. She is wonderful, just probably one of the best behaved, smartest pets I've ever had. So she's just really a part of the family, and I've always grown up with dogs in the house. We always had dogs when I was growing up. Austin grew up with cats, and so the going and having a dog was a new experience. And when we first moved from our townhouse to our home that we've lived in for a good 20 plus years, it's a single family home, and apparently we had told my stepson, who was 7 at the time we got married, we had said, when we move out of the townhouse, we get bigger space, more of a yard, we'll get a dog. I think we might have been in the house for a week, and he's like, so where's my dog? So we're like, oh yeah, we did say that, didn't we? So we did get a dog, and it was a puppy, and his name ended up being Buddy because we couldn't come up with anything more creative than that. But he the first night that we had him at the house, kind of separation from the other litter mates, and he was whining, and my husband was like, do you think we can take him back? So we kept him. We didn't take him back. We are definitely dog people now. So
turned out okay.
It turned out okay. So
where did you go to college?
So I went to it was Western Maryland College at the time, but it's McDaniel now. And for all of you people who are still on kind of different polar ends of that, I've embraced it. I'm a marketer. I understand. It's a very, as I can tell you from being a parent right now, searching, it is a competitive market out there for colleges. And it's interesting because a lot of times people say, well, how, you're from New Jersey, how did you end up in Westminster at McDaniel? And interestingly, there's a lot of people that are from New Jersey in the Northeast who do go to McDaniel. But we ended up hearing about it because a graduate of McDaniel, his mom went to high school with my mom, and they were good friends. And we weren't super close at all, but she had said, hey, my son went there, had a really great experience. And so we looked, and it was just, I think a lot of times the way, when someone comes to visit one of our communities and you just feel like, this is my place, I feel like I really fit in here, it's kind of my I can connect with the people. That was the experience I had when I got to McDaniel. I just really fell in love with the campus. I just felt like it was home. And so that, I looked at a number of different schools, but that really kind of stole my heart. And so, I moved away from New Jersey, and probably about when I was 18, went back occasionally, but really just embraced being down here, and have now been living in Maryland a lot longer than I lived in New Jersey. So.
Well, and I know initially when we were interviewing
Mm-hmm.
for your role, you talked about the connections that are there, and it seems like almost every month you and I are in some sort of meeting, and there's somebody else connected to McDaniel,
Right.
and that becomes a great icebreaker. So
Oh,
it's
yeah,
kind of nice
absolutely.
because you have that historical knowledge,
Right,
like
right.
many of our residents at Carroll Lutheran Village do. So
Yes.
a lot of them were Western Marylanders. So.
Exactly. It was interesting when we had our annual meeting
Right.
this year with all of the churches and things. We had a group of us that were standing there, and included myself, who's a member of the team. We had one of our delegates who was a friend of mine from college that we ended up realizing crossing paths here. One of our board members is a graduate, and one of our chaplains is also a graduate.
Right.
And we all graduated within a few years of each other from our undergrad.
Yeah.
So it was funny. I didn't think about it till afterwards. We should have got a picture. So
Yeah.
we'll have to do it again.
It's been a coming home.
It was. It's really in a little way surreal being back here working in Westminster, looking out the window from our Main Street office and being able to see the skyline of McDaniel College. It's very it's just very cool. And my first place that I lived out of college was actually in Ellicott City.
Oh, okay.
So I actually have a connection with Lutheran Village at Miller's Grant from having lived in that area as well. So it's very serendipitous so I'm a big believer in that.
You spent probably the most time on Main Street outside of maybe a couple of our team members
Yes.
at the Main Street office. So
Indeed.
pretty impressive. So how did you get into senior housing?
That's a great question. So I mentioned before I started in marketing at Farmers Mechanics Bank, went to work for the United Way of Frederick County, and right about the time that I started at the United Way, one of the board members had a relationship with an agency in Frederick called Levin Company. And they were doing a variety of different things. It was an organization that was founded right there in Frederick, but the agency was doing some pro bono work for the United Way, providing design services, doing collateral, that type of thing. And so when I had been at the United Way for a bit and then was looking for a different challenge, Levin Company had a position available as an account manager, and I had developed a relationship, having worked with them as kind of a client. So they hired me, and at the time, Levin Company was still kind of had its roots in the Frederick area, where they were working with the hospital and different types of organizations that were right there, a variety of different businesses, but a majority of what they were doing at the time was actually working in senior living. And this goes back to the early 2000s. And so that's really how I got into the senior living field, was working on the creative marketing agency side, and working with a variety of different communities, starting in the Mid-Atlantic, but getting more broad. And after being at Levin Company for just under 20 years before I moved to another agency in the senior living field, we were working with communities all across the entire country, the continental U.S. We hadn't yet made it to Hawaii yet, but all across the continental U.S., expansions, blue skies, occupancy turnaround, just working on a variety of different aspects of it, and really bringing a level of thought leadership to a lot of these communities. Spent a lot of time on the podium at Leading Age, educating people about how to think about their marketing and their sales, and differentiating themselves in their competitive markets.
Yeah, so why choose Lutheran Social Ministries of Maryland?
That's a great question. So I mentioned serendipity a little while ago, and I definitely have a story that relates to that. So as I mentioned, after being at Levin Company for almost 20 years, I was actually recruited to go head up client service for a competitor agency that had been experiencing some different changes, some different kind of strategic direction decisions, and they kind of lured me away, which was it was a really great opportunity. It really expanded my awareness, different types of organizations I was working with. So I don't regret making the decision, but after I'd been there for 9 months, long story short, the ownership of that company closed the business. So I found myself, like many people, COVID had a real impact on a lot of different business models, business types, among other things. But like many people, kind of found myself at a point where I'm, at a mature age from a, career standpoint, where I then had this moment just sort of forced on me in some ways to say, what do I want to do next? I've been in the consulting and the advertising agency side of the field for so long, but something I had been thinking about for quite a number of years is I would love the opportunity to work on the provider side. I've worked with so many amazing people that I've built great relationships with, and I know from being their partner, seeing the challenges, seeing the opportunity, seeing the joy of working more directly with the people that we're serving. And it was something that I really just felt very drawn to. And so as I was able to clarify in my mind and articulate, what do I want to do next? I was able to describe that to people that I was networking with, that I knew from having worked on a number of different clients and projects, and through sort of that relationship was able to get connected with you, and we had a good conversation, and there were a number of different things that really clicked with what I had envisioned in my mind that I wanted to do next. As I mentioned, I live in Frederick County, Maryland. I didn't want to have to relocate my family,
Right.
High school kids. My father-in-law still lives local. Did not want to pick up and move. To be honest, I was on an airplane a lot in my time with the consulting firms, and I really felt at this kind of season in my life, I wanted to stop doing that. And but I, when I really thought about the type of provider side that I wanted to work with, not-for-profit, that mission-based, faith-based organization is really where I feel that I can bring the most value, and that I enjoyed working with the most in all the different types of organizations. Also working with a growing multi-site. A few life plan communities, not dozens and dozens, because it really enables me to be much more specific to their needs, specific to their story and who they are. And so it's just amazing that the timing aligned so well, that it was a position that you were then just starting to look at refilling, and it was something that really just resonated with what I was hoping to land into.
Yeah, so that's a great point to kind of share, is that we purposely kept the position open for, I think, a period of about 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was to do more of a deep dive on ourselves, to look at what was really needed, where we wanted to go, the type of person we wanted to bring in, the type of skill sets. And it was interesting because I actually was having a conversation with a business associate that we both know, and they had pulled me aside and they said, "What are your biggest concerns?" And I said, "It's finding great talent." And I said, specifically at the executive level, because so many of my counterparts are starting to retire. Some of them are leaving the field because of COVID, or have left the field because of COVID, but a lot of them are reaching retirement age, and there's about a 10-year gap from about 50 to 60 where we just lack that experience in our field. And it was really interesting. So we're having this great conversation, and he said, I'll keep my eye open. I think I understand your organization, understand you. I think I'll keep an eye open. And I think it was maybe a couple months had gone by, And he made a phone call, and it's somebody I talk to fairly frequently for other business reasons, and he said, I think I have someone for you. Now, I have to admit, normally when I have these conversations, I think I'll never hear from that person again, because that's typically the way these go. But I knew he was so invested in the moment and asking a lot of questions that I was very eager to meet the person that he was talking about, and it ended up being, really good scenario that not only was Lisa local, she had such a wealth of experience from a marketing perspective, and really from a perspective of understanding other senior housing products across the country. Really gives her that experience that lends us an advantage here. So I was very pleased by that. The other interesting part that I was very empathetic around is that I understand that when you change organizations, especially when it's sort of forced on you in a way, and I think at a certain level, all of us have experienced that in one way or another. It's very challenging in that moment to pivot and to look at something else, and so I really give you a lot of credit for having the fortitude, but also taking that leap of faith. And I'm glad it's worked out so far, because this has been great.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about VP of Marketing. One of the questions I get quite often is, well, does that person do sales? And I've gone to great lengths to explain it, and at times I'm a bit wordy, and so I probably lose some folks. So I think that Lisa is great at explaining the difference between VP of Sales, VP of Marketing.
Thank you.
If you don't know, Ken Connolly is our Vice President of Operations and Sales. And so I'll leave the rest of this question to
Sure, absolutely. Great question, and yes, I too get the same question a lot of times. And I think, in some ways for our organization, because in previous iterations of the position, marketing and sales have been together under the same vice president, and that's the way it is in a lot of organizations. But sales is very much aligned with operations, and they need to be working well together to make it work. So I think the partnership that we have works out really, really great. So the marketing and the sales piece, probably in the most simplest terms, the way I can explain the difference is, on the marketing side, we're here to tell the stories and get people to raise their hand and say, I'm curious to learn more. And that's probably in some of the simplest way, that's marketing's responsibility. And then it's like two sides of a coin, particularly in our field where it is it's a big decision. It's a lifestyle decision. We're not putting, add to cart in Amazon and buying something on, buy now. It's not that type of decision process. So, there's a lot of things that go on and bump back and forth between marketing and sales, but ultimately the sales responsibility is to build that relationship and that rapport and that trust with that prospective future resident, and to help educate them to determine, is this the right decision for you? What's the best decision for you? And help them get to the point of making the decision to, make the deposit and the move in. So it can be, and it should be, very seamless between those two aspects, but they do have a very distinct role and responsibility in that journey. And one of the things that I count myself to be very blessed is, in my experience, I have seen organizations where, when marketing and sales are under two separate leaders, that it does not go well. I'm sure you've seen the same thing. But I consider myself very blessed, because the partner that I have in that sales, Ken Connolly, he's our VP of Operations and Sales, I could not ask for a better partner. He is so receptive to ideas. We have such a great rapport. It's just, we fell very quickly into a very easy communication and an easy collaboration. And I have just found it to be one of the great blessings of working here, is to have a partner such as Ken, because without that, not having that trust, not having that willingness to test things and try new ideas, and not everything works, and that's okay. So that's been really fantastic.
Yeah, so I'm going to put a little more meat on the bone and
Sure.
give you a couple more questions. So when you think about that sales and operations connection, oftentimes when we talk about sales, it's about the metrics that drive the fundamentals of acquiring a new resident, essentially. And as part of that, there are certain steps that you have to take depending on the level of care. A lot of that is day to day, month to month, and it needs to be a proactive discussion where we're talking about what are some of the things that move that prospect to making that big decision. A lot of times it's connected to operations and things that happen at the community, and that's why there's that importance of having kin in both roles and be able to connect with the team here on site. So when we get to marketing, talk about the things that are underneath your umbrella in terms of what you do day in, day out.
Absolutely. Well, one thing that I just want to piggyback on what you were saying is that metrics piece is so important.
Right.
So in our business, it's very much, it's an art and a science.
Right.
And yes, there's the art of the creative, there's the art of the message and that tone, there's the art of somebody just being good at being a skilled sales counselor who's going to help build that relationship and answer the questions. But the science part is there are proven practices, proven benchmarks for the conversion process from your leads and your calls and your tours to your sales. So really helping to bring that more to the forefront in what we're doing from a marketing and a sales standpoint, because really that data, that knowledge is power. And a sales counselor can really be in charge of their own destiny when they really embrace, this is how I can actually use this information to take control of my process and my book of business, so to speak. So that's really important. But as far as under the things that we're doing on the marketing side, ultimately, the success of the communities with the occupancy targets, that ultimately is the bottom line benchmark of how successful are we being. But there's a kind of a couple different categories of what we do. One, it's making sure that we are telling the stories effectively for our communities, and that we're helping with that messaging for the independent living, the assisted living, the memory care. We have short-term rehab, we have the long-term care and the skilled nursing. Those are very much about outreach and referral development. So while we aren't always at the forefront of doing those pieces or that aspect of it, helping to make sure that the people that are doing that work have the right materials, they have the right message. And it's not simply about the brochures or a postcard mailing or an ad you might see online or in the newspaper. It's making sure that the experience that the prospects have, whether that's the person who may live here eventually, an adult child, a healthcare professional or a financial advisor, that whenever they have an experience with our brand, with the Carroll Lutheran Village brand, with the Lutheran Village at Miller's Grant brand, that it's a consistent experience. How often have you had a situation where, you think a business or a restaurant, or you see something online, but then when you go there, the experience you actually have does not match up to what your expectation was? Well, suddenly they've lost some value in the brand, and they've potentially lost a customer. Right. And that is very much part of what's important for us. So having that consistency of the message, and our business has evolved so much over time. I've been doing this long enough that there were days where our main focus was direct mail that got into somebody's mailbox, or an ad in the newspaper. And the ad in the newspaper oftentimes had a coupon. Now, it wasn't that they filled out and they cut it out and sent it in. It was just communicated, here's an action to take. Well, now, a couple decades later, direct mail is still in the mix. In some markets, print advertising is still in the mix. but it's really very much about digital, and people are doing so much research online and really understanding how do we connect with that consumer and give them the information that they need to feel that they're empowered. That is so important, and that's a different path than people who may just walk in or come to an event. So it's become much more involved and much more sophisticated. That's what goes on with our communities, and of course our two communities are in very different places in their life cycle. Pearre Lutheran Village, large community. We're working on reinvesting through renovation. We're working on rebuilding occupancy in now that we've really become much more competitive in the product that we're marketing. Lutheran Village at Miller's Grant, it has a successful expansion underway, and they are full with a growing wait list, which is very exciting. And so, very different places and different needs for the marketing programs. Beyond that, so Lutheran Social Ministries of Maryland being our, kind of the new kid on the block in that family in some ways, our role is to provide kind of economies of resources, of centralized resources like the marketing. There are more things that we can do for our communities because we have something centralized that a standalone community would just not be able to afford. To have, someone who's dedicated to content and social media, someone who has the strategy experience and background to really, understand how to put those things together. And so there's strength in the organization having LSMMD as part of that, Lutheran Social Ministries of Maryland. But within that, what we're also looking at is we have a very capable and strong philanthropy department. So marketing partners with them to make sure that we're getting professional messaging, professional materials to support their needs. Also our talent acquisition, which is part of our human resources. In our field, COVID was such a challenge and really it exposed, I think, some gaps for our field in our ability to attract and retain top talent in a variety of different areas. And just as senior living has become so competitive to bring in people to live here, so it's the same with bringing in team members. And so being able to work on building a brand that supports us being an employer of choice, a desirable place to work because the culture, the benefits, the experience, the value we place on our team members, that is something that requires and really deserves just as much attention from a thoughtful strategic marketing approach as it is to market to have people come and make a decision to live here.
So three aspects that probably two aspects that most people don't realize that the marketing is involved with. The salesmanship that goes with talent acquisition is something that's become increasingly important to the organization, let alone other organizations. You have to be first to that individual. We are in a marketplace where talent is not widely available, unfortunately, in just about every position. And so to get in front of people, to tell stories, because most of our employees, it's the story that is capturing that individual. It's not necessarily the job, believe it or not. Most of the time when we talk to our team members, it's, of course, pay is important, but it's more about the experience. It's about the why behind why they're here. And so we need to be able to paint that picture in a variety of disciplines to better educate the public on what's possible here in senior housing, but also just capture that talent that's available. And I think probably most people picked up on this, but the two main areas that we see sales come from, circling back to sales, is related to our website, and certainly our social media experience plays a role in that, because we want to get people to start thinking about us, and hopefully they go to our website from there. We're able to measure those metrics on a daily or monthly basis and determine what are people reacting to, what pages are people staying on the longest. But it also becomes speed to return a message. So those individuals have an opportunity to fill out a form. The quicker we are to reaching back out to you, the better chance we have of selling. Because you can bet that if that individual has gone on our website, they've gone on somebody else's website as well. So you have to be first to the sale. I would say in some respects it's similar to car sales or to home sales. Hate to compare it to the two, but it truly is. You will see most of those two industries pick up the phone immediately. Same thing has to happen on this side. The second way that we tend to see our most sales is through word of mouth. Our residents do a fantastic job of selling the experience. We need to lean on those individuals, and we appreciate your support with that because it makes a difference. Whether it's you getting out in the general public volunteering or you supporting sales directly, it certainly helps. We know that having a friend here makes the living experience that much better. So help us help you.
Yes.
At the end of the day.
and Jeff, I'll just kind of piggyback on that, and that again is why operations and sales being paired is so important, because and this is not just our community's experience. This is, across the industry, across the country, the majority of the people who move in have done so because of personal connections, because of that word of mouth, that trusted referral. And not only is it that they're bringing in new people who raise their hand and are expressing interest, they're converting faster and better than other sources because of that trust, because of that alignment of kind of a qualified lead, if you will. So, when to your point, when we do come and tap the residents, who I can tell you have been very, very generous with their time, they've been, definitely available and willing to answer my questions in my first year here, which has been fantastic. And we have, plans to do things with really formalizing and strengthening an ambassadors program, and doing things that we can then really help respond to what residents have been saying, which is, how can I help? And the operation piece, we can't have that success with the marketing and the sales if the residents aren't satisfied that, the job that we're doing for them as they're living here, the culinary experience, the housekeeping experience, the responsiveness of our facilities team, all of those things are so important, because if you're satisfied, then you're more willing to say, yes, I'll help, or I'm going to tell my friends about it, or I'm going to, share that post on Facebook, or, give a good positive Google review, all of which are ways you can help. So.
Well, the part that we didn't talk about, the part of your job is communications, and that's a part that probably most people perhaps have a misunderstanding of. Most of our internal communication, so if you live at one of our communities, your executive directors or directors are drafting those communications. If one of them has a question or needs some help, of course the team at marketing can help. That's more of an internal communication. So a lot of the communications that we focus on are those external inquiries. So oftentimes we're contacted from everything from the New York Times to the Washington Post and everywhere in between.
Right.
So you want to talk a little bit about
Sure,
that?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So communication is definitely, I think of marketing as kind of the overarching umbrella, and communication is an aspect of that. And, certainly, as you pointed out about the media, sometimes it's positive. I know Marianne, our Director of Marketing and Communications, she will send out stories that have more than just a, hey, look at us, we're amazing. It's connected to some, broader topic, broader interest, which is really what's necessary, because there's so much news and there's so much different media outlets, and we've seen success with that. We've seen where we're really getting coverage from the news media, and they're looking to us as a trusted resource and voice, which is one of the most priorities that you want to have from a communication standpoint, is establishing yourself as, if the news media needs a comment from someone, that you're on their short list of picking up the phone and say, can you comment on this? Now, there's also a need that, knock on wood, we don't have challenges that some organizations have, but crisis communication, if there were to be, and certainly as a field, we saw this need during COVID, of having a plan that if something were to go wrong in the larger community, if something were to go wrong with one of our neighbors, and neighboring or competitive communities, and they want to call up and ask for our opinion on it, that we have a process in place to be able to address that.
Yeah.
So that's really important. And the other aspect from a communication standpoint, it's not simply about the paid marketing that we put out on digital advertising or direct mail, but it's also what type of communication are we putting out to other partner organizations in our area, the Chamber of Commerce, the colleges that are here, all of them are important partners that if they understand and are educated about what we do and we offer, or there's some reciprocity. We have some great programs with our talent acquisition in partnership with some of the colleges with education opportunities, clinical sites for some schools, for nursing programs. All of that is important to make sure that we're getting the message right and that we have the materials to be able to communicate that effectively.
Part of the marketing team's role when we're contacted by media in particular is to vet out what exactly is the article to better understand it. Most of the time we lean towards participating in those types of inquiries. However, there are times where it just may not suit us. Lisa had mentioned if there's something that happens at another community or competitor, oftentimes those are things that we want to avoid. We don't want to take a position of saying something about a competitor indirectly that really we shouldn't be involved in.
Take out of context.
Exactly.
Right.
And so, but in terms of COVID, quite often, we've had some other opportunities as well related to low-income housing, as well as meeting the needs of greater Marylanders in the silver tsunami that's coming our way. We're in the thick of it now. We know that housing for seniors across the state and across the country is well underserved in every area of the continuum. And at this point, most states are grappling with how do we help and support senior housing to make this happen. And that'll be an interesting future for all of us as we navigate that. I can tell you that there's a lot of interest and growth, not only amongst our organization, but amongst all of my senior housing brethren. And I can tell you that the state is very interested in seeing that happens to help solve a problem. And so most recently I had a article related to Lutheran Village at Miller's Grant, and part of that article was related to how do we meet the growing need that's here. And so we're glad to be part of that solution. We have a long ways to go in our state, but looking forward to being part of that.
Well, and Jeff, I think that's a really good point, because even though the core of our business is focused on the people that live here, the team members that work here, making sure that we're sustaining that business, the strength of our organization also means that we can be a thought leader, and we can be at the right tables, at the state level, being able to even speak with government officials to help educate them and understand the need of, as you pointed out, the silver tsunami is a common term. When you look at just the absolute population skyrocket that is the baby boomers, with that, that age group born between 46 and 64, it's just exponentially growing. And as a country, we are not in a position to serve the housing needs of that entire population as it stands now. So it's why it's so important that the things that we are doing and exploring, the expansion at Lutheran Village at Miller's Grant, in the conversations and the partnerships that our organization and similar ones have in being able to figure out how do we best serve the needs of our older adults in our population. That experience and that thought leadership is so important.
So I won't digress too far here, but when you think about talent acquisition, and then you think about the growing need of senior housing communities in our area, it's interesting to start thinking about where do these people come from? Where do we acquire the talent? Current projections, not only in Maryland but also in neighboring states, do not demonstrate that we have enough employees, enough workers that are out there. So it'll be quite the challenge, because as with any solution, oftentimes there's multiple parts to how we get there. And so as you can imagine, the point that Lisa made about the state and some of our politicians, it's also partnering with those groups to look at how we can make this an attractive place to live. I don't mean the communities, but Maryland in itself,
Right.
As well as how to incentivize younger people to be interested in senior housing. And
Exactly.
so we need to continue to push. I think immigration plays a role in that. We have a long way to go to solve some of our problems, but I think most industries are seeing some of the same challenge with
Right.
the workforce. So.
Right. And it is a very, that workforce topic is something that is very deep and complex, because there's everything from, affordable housing
Right.
in different regions, public transportation, the education aspect, and you pointed out of communicating to a new generation of potential workforce that there is, it is fulfilling, and it is, there's so much to be gained by working in the field of senior living and caring for older adults. It's not necessarily one of those things that, a 20-something says, yes, that's what I want to do. It's so rewarding, as we all know. But being able to get that message across in an effective way is something that is a big part of the challenge that we have.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point, because my oldest child entered the workforce last year, and she actually works in senior housing at a competitor. And the reason why she knew so much about it, of course, was because she used to come into communities as a kid when I worked there. However, she started working in a senior housing community and got her feet wet. She got to know our residents. She got to know the different disciplines, the different opportunities within the community. And it really broadened her perspective in terms of what she could do, because her initial idea of senior housing is my jobs. And she said, that's not really what I want to do. And she's seen me at all levels, small, big communities, and she said, that's really not who I am. But she was interested in serving residents and being involved in that way. And so I think there's a place for a lot of young people once they have an opportunity to have the time here and the experience. So we're going to jump to another topic similar, but you've been here for a year. I think we reached a year last week.
On the 2nd, yes,
Yeah, so
January 2nd.
What are the takeaways?
Wow, it's been quite a year. It's been quite a journey, and I was thinking about this, and I think there's a couple of different things. Is over this course of the year, I've continually tried to remind myself it's a marathon, not a sprint. There are a number of opportunities, but I need to make sure that I'm taking the time to listen, to learn, to understand, and to formulate some opinions that are based on enough of a body of knowledge. I mean, I'm a big fan of metrics and a big fan of data, so I've been trying to really kind of gather that in. But I think there's a couple of key things. Is that as an organization over the last handful of years, there has been a lot of progress and change as far as moving more towards embracing the metrics, embracing the digital, embracing, we have to do and things in a different way than we've done historically in order to be competitive and successful. And Jeff, the leadership that you've brought to the organization has really accomplished a lot of those things, which is great, kind of set the path. But what we need to do next is to Carroll Lutheran Village is kind of at the forefront as far as we've got occupancy that we want to refill, but being able to make sure that we're telling our story in an authentic and unique way. You talked about stories as far as telling team member stories and those experiences, telling our resident stories and using that as an example of what is the experience here, and being able to make that emotional connection with the people in our market. We have an opportunity to do a more effective and more cohesive job with that. There's also the aspect you mentioned about the website and that digital presence. We're doing a number of things well. There's a number of untapped opportunities that we're getting ready to get more into. So those are two areas that I think are very important. And just overall, looking at ourselves and recognizing that as an organization, we are, we're not a small time operation. We are a large operation that employs a lot of people, that is responsible for, the care and welfare of a lot of older adults. And so stepping into that role, really embracing that, and being sophisticated in our marketing efforts, being sophisticated in how we message things and what we put out into the market, it's very important for us to embrace and do that. So those were some of the kind of broadest takeaways as far as what our next initiatives are.
In other words, brand management, to put it very simply. And I think a lot of people don't realize the work that goes behind the scenes to manage the brand. It can very easily go awry when you don't have a central owner, and that can set the standards as we go and help people understand the why behind those standards.
Right.
So,
and it's interesting because branding, I mean, if I took a microphone and walked around and talked to 20 people on the street and said, what is branding? I'd probably get a lot of blank looks, but I would probably also get a lot of different answers. And what a brand is really, what is it that you as an organization, as a company, what is it that you do differently and better than anyone else?
Right.
And that, it's, yes, our logo, our signage is part of the brand, how we handle, the logo, the types of pictures that we use, but it's also that voice, that tone, and that brand management aspect that you were speaking of is really getting that foundation of everything that we do. Can we put it up next to this central brand platform and say, is this in alignment? This might sound like a little bit of a weird example, but when you're watching TV and you see a Geico commercial, you could see the gecko, you could see the caveman, you could see the little talking stack of money, and all of them are very different treatments. I mean, you do see some ads where they kind of put them both in the same thing, but really when you put them next to insurance is a boring subject, but we don't need to take ourselves seriously. So let's do things that are going to grab people's attention and have us memorable. And every single one of those things fits with that point. But it's very different execution. So, it's a very nuanced and sophisticated process for proper brand management. And some of the stuff is so behind the scenes that you don't really recognize it, but you understand when it's done well, when you have that good, consistent, sophisticated experience with a particular brand. So,
and knowing what our brand is and how to market that. A lot of times people will ask me that we know what we are and what we're aspiring to be, but you also get some of that feedback from the prospective resident. Why did they come to us? What was it about who we are that makes us special? And so that factors into that brand, and it starts to become that why behind that decision to move in here. And so we really have to constantly ask that question, which is usually far different than somebody who's lived here for 20 years when they ask me the brand of it. So
indeed.
Yeah, we could go on forever on
I know.
that topic, obviously. So talk to us about 2 to 3 initiatives that you're focusing on for 2025.
Sure.
I'm saying that.
Yeah, I know, it's amazing. So, well, and I think that there's a couple things that are related to the things I've observed, which is we really need to get kind of crystal clear on how do we articulate that brand? How do we articulate the Carroll Lutheran Village experience and promise of performance? How do we articulate the Miller's Grant, promise of performance and that brand? And they're different. There's a nuance. I mean, there's some things that we share, but certainly there's a different experience on those 2 campuses, and also collectively what ties them together. And that's that Lutheran Social Ministries of Maryland. We're in the background. We're not we're kind of a house of brands, not a branded house,
Right.
which I could go down a whole path with that comment, but what does it mean to be a Lutheran Social Ministries of Maryland community? And what is that, kind of good housekeeping seal of approval? So that is something that I really want to look at this year of how do we define those things more clearly and how do we put them out there? Another initiative is that digital presence that I talked about with redeveloping websites that are going to be very user-friendly and functional in helping to educate a prospect and advance them to the point where they can engage with one of our sales counselors, or in the case of someone looking for a career, can engage with hiring managers. Websites, not just an online brochure, it's meant to be a living and breathing tool that helps give people the information that they want and move them forward. So it's not just about the website, it's things that are related to that, one of which is marketing automation. Which is, we as consumers, we live with that every single day in the things that we buy and information that we gather. Back to the conversation about my son looking at schools, we're getting so much information that's coming to us via email, via, social media, different things. It's all connected to that marketing element of putting our programs in place that are going to work in concert with what our sales counselors do and don't get in the way of the effort and the good work that they're doing, but are there to support it. So those are two things that are very much tied up in what our communities need. But there's also then with our talent acquisition team and our philanthropy team, really working closely with them to figure out how can we best support their storytelling needs and their needs to be able to accomplish their particular goals.
Yeah. So I'm often asked what are some of the things that we focus on with team members in particular, and usually I answer mission, vision, and values, and we talk about how that impacts an individual's role and helping that individual know how they play a part in it regardless of their position within the organization, but more importantly how they can speak to it. And I would say that sales kind of focuses there as well, and marketing. We really want each of our individual team members to talk a little bit about the brand in terms of what they do in their own words. And that to me is success at the end of the day, if we can get to that point, because it's not about maybe rehearsing what Lisa and I share. It's more about telling the story in their own words, which is going to be impactful because it'll be more meaningful to them. They'll understand it better, but also they'll be able to communicate it more easily. If you're not in the marketing world, it's very difficult to get into the metrics of it, and so it's very important that everybody meets that initiative where they're at in their career, in their lives. So it's exciting that we have a lot of fun things ahead of us.
It is.
So what question are you asked most in your role?
Wow. That's a great question. It's interesting because I do think helping people to understand that difference between marketing and sales, there's, as I mentioned about if you asked 10 different people the definition of brand, you'd get something different. There's a lot of interchangeable use of marketing and sales. So I think that's probably the biggest question that I get. And just helping people to understand. I mean, we all work very well together as a team, so there's no, kind of not my job type of response, but making sure that if people have questions that they're getting as quickly as possible to the right people. Even just today I had a voicemail from a resident who, had called asking about something that, was just not in my control to address, but I was able to very quickly get it to the right person who could get back to her and answer her need. So. And if you're wondering, Lisa, as well as the rest of her team, are in and out of the communities pretty frequently. More than likely, many of you have met them. They're in different meetings and introduce themselves. They are officed out of Main Street primarily, but I would say that all of us are usually on the run and at one of the communities, if not at Main Street. Well, it fills my cup to be at the communities because able to be directly in the presence of the people that we're impacting, whether it's the residents, the team members, the family members, and that's so recharging for us who, any of us who work in our kind of little space, regardless of what our role is, to be able to, with your own eyes, see and experience the impact of the work that we are doing. That is so meaningful to me. And I am, I've sat down and had coffee with different residents, and it's just, it's so valuable to me. So I absolutely, if people want to, sit down and talk with me, those types of things, I absolutely love to be able to hear resident stories and get to know people. And it's been a year, which the year has gone by very quickly, but I'm still working on getting to meet people and learn people's names and hear people's stories. So I'm really excited to continue doing that.
Good. Well, we're going to pivot here back to the personal. So, how do you spend your spare time?
Do you have any hobbies? I don't have spare time.
No,
so.
I know.
No, it's funny.
Right?
I know when the season of my life with the kids and everything, it's sort of like being an unpaid Uber driver isn't a hobby. So no, it's wonderful. I mean, personally, things that I love to do, I love to read. It might sound a little bit silly, but kind of like the young adult novel series, like the Hunger Games and things like that. I certainly really enjoy those and can compare notes with my daughter, who's at the age now where she's starting to read them, which is great. So that's exciting. So I love to read. My downfall is that when I find a good book, I kind of get sucked into it to the exclusion of all else. So when you're a busy mom, that's usually not conducive to life in general. Guilty pleasure is there's some TV shows I tend to binge watch. I don't think I've watched anything the actual time that it's run on television probably for 20 years. It's just not, so there's a little bit of that. But so fun fact, when I build sort of my bucket list of things I want to do when my children are grown and out of the house and have spare time, is community theater is actually something that I've always loved all through middle school, high school, college. I performed on the stage, and I would love to get back into that. I mean, probably different roles than 20, 30 years ago, but that would be fun. Yeah, I definitely like that. So it's funny, my son, I think, gets all of his athletic ability from my husband, because it's not from me. And then, frankly, neither of us have any idea where my daughter got a rhythm for the dancing, because it's not from us either. But, but that's a joy. So I want to try pickleball at some point. I played tennis in high school, not super well, but I think I'd like to try pickleball.
Well, I've started to think about that, because I'm sometimes asked the question, what do you do when you're not here? And most of it's like you said, or
right.
I'm kind of chasing kids at this point. But when I started here, I had 5 kids at home.
God bless you.
Yeah, in another 6 months, I'll be down to 2. And it dawned on me, I really do need to figure something else out.
Right?
Because like you, I've tried to find those things that I could do with my kids on some level, not everything, but where you can have some connections as they grow. But the reality is, though, that it's coming fast.
Right.
That all of a sudden we'll be alone.
Yes.
So,
got to cultivate some common interests with your wife, and then also with some other people.
Yeah.
So.
Thankfully, my wife and I still like each other, so that part works. But I need to find something else to do besides hanging out there. So
funny. Yeah. No, I know. I think about that sometimes too. About trying to, because both my husband and I, it's sort of like what do you do in your spare time? We don't have any spare time, so I don't remember what our hobbies are. So. Yeah, we do I'll tell you what, I love living in Frederick and in the region we do, because the restaurants and the culinary experience is just so much fun, and I like food. So I'm not a big cook personally, but there's fantastic restaurants in downtown Frederick. Rock Salt here in Westminster is amazing. There's some really cool restaurants that are in the Ellicott City area. I love to go and try different places like that, just that experience, and that's something that's so fun in our field, to be able to have that same type of experience in our community restaurants that you can get going to something just down on Main Street.
So one of the first times I went out to eat with Lisa, she said, "You go ahead. I'm looking at the menu," and I'm pretty boring in my eating, so I ordered something pretty boring, and she paused for a second, and I could tell she was thinking about it, and then she went, "I'm ordering what I want." And
I don't even remember what I ordered, but I know it wasn't super healthy. So.
Yeah. You had crab cakes. I still
okay,
remember
it was
that.
tasty
Yeah.
though. So
Yeah, so
yes.
But it is funny though, because you enjoy the experience, which I appreciate. You know,
Yes.
I probably should enjoy it more.
Well, you are not the first person I've worked with who food is fuel.
Yes.
Say that 5 times fast.
Yeah.
Food is fuel. You know, which I wish I could get on that mindset, because my doctor would probably like me a lot more for that. So.
Yeah. A very simple way of looking at it. So what's on your bucket list?
Oh my goodness. Well, the community theater is probably on the bucket list. Travel. So I love to travel.
Oh.
So it's funny, because when we were just starting our conversations last fall for about the position, we had to kind of shoehorn in because my sister, so I have a younger sister and a younger brother, and my sister was actually going to Europe for 2 back-to-back conferences, or a couple days in between.
Right.
It was actually less expensive for her to stay over there for the few extra days than to fly back and forth.
France and Spain?
So it was France and Spain. So she had called me, and this was shortly after I was out of work, and she had called and she said, "Would you want to come couch surf and come join me? The hotel would be paid for." And I was like, wow, I feel like a college student again. I have no job. Let me just go to Europe. So it was funny. So, but really, I mean, that was such a fantastic experience, and I would love to travel more. We go to the beach a lot as a family from a family vacation, but Hawaii, Europe again. So fun fact, when I was in high school as a freshman, I actually went to the USSR on a school trip.
Oh, cool.
And it was still the USSR there. It was before the fall of the wall. So this has gone back quite a ways. And that was such an amazing experience to see and experience another culture and their interest in our culture. But certainly, France, Spain, Italy, both my husband's and my family have roots in Scotland, and so being able to go to the United Kingdom, we'd love to do that, and Australia at some point in time, but that's probably more of a retirement type of thing, but also we'd love to travel the United States. When I was 9, my parents took all 3 of us kids, remember I'm the oldest, I was 9, in a station wagon, and we drove all the way across the country. My dad's sister was in California, she was getting married, and so we stayed with some family and my dad's old naval buddies, like all the way across the country. But it wasn't probably until I was maybe close to 40, and I think my parents were doing the 30-year trip. It just happened to work out that way. It wasn't really an anniversary trip, but I was like, you went with 3 kids under the age of 9 in a station wagon. The youngest turned 3 when we were in El Paso, Texas. Were you on drugs? I don't know if I can say that, but I was like, really? I'm not sure I would do that.
But see, I think all of us of a certain age,
yes,
remember that's how you actually went
Yeah,
anywhere.
right. And nobody had seatbelts.
You drove across country, and if you had a station wagon like we did,
Right.
I got to face the back and stare at the people behind me. That was before I had motion sickness. As I've gotten older, I can't do that kind of thing.
Yes, yes.
But I remember being in that far back seat, and they'd let you out of that big swinging door.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
But it was, I mean, that was just such an experience. And, at the risk of turning it into some like sitcom movie, renting a Winnebago and driving across country. But that we have so many amazing things to see across the country. It'd be neat to do it more than just hopping back and forth in an airplane, which I've done for a lot of years. So.
It's a beautiful country. You got to take the time.
It is. So yeah, bucket list.
Could you live without the internet?
Ooh, I want to say yes. I mean, I think there would definitely be probably some withdrawal. I think any of us would have some withdrawal. But, I mean, as many of you probably watching this, I'm of the generation that I can still read a paper map. I can find my way around a library. You know, I mean, I know how to get up and turn the channel on the television. But you know, so I think I think as a society we've gotten so sucked into the need of it. And I'm actually listening to a book on Audible right now called The Anxious Generation, which is really talking about the rewiring of our youth and sort of the difference between the millennial and the Gen Z generations in how they handle just the information coming at them and the rewirings of our brain. It's just really kind of fascinating, but I think you know, we're probably among the last generations that could honestly say, yeah, we could probably live without the internet. So
you know, I've always felt that computers and the internet were a good thing at the beginning. And I still feel that way about computers in general. I don't know about the internet any longer. I think whether it's the rewiring or, you know, information that's not quite correct and so easily found, I think a lot of times it just sucks you in such a negative way.
Right.
That when you do get away from it, it's really a nice refresher. I noticed, whether it's in my family or just people that I'm around, that cell phone sitting next to you at all times, and I think, goodness, it's like a tether. You know, it's almost like you couldn't go anywhere. I know with my wife in particular, she'll get mad at me for not carrying the phone, you know, on the weekend to the gym or to the grocery store, and
I give my husband grief.
And frankly, if you need it to go for 30 minutes, it's kind of crazy, you know, that you need it that badly. And I understand the what if, and it's great to have it, but yeah, there's good and bad to it.
I honestly think it's like anything, you know, when you talk to some of our residents who are, you know, just advanced in years, but they're so active and healthy and things like that, and you know, their answer is it's all about moderation. You know, and it's like you have to have the willpower and the discipline to put the phone out of sight, out of mind. Don't sleep with it next to your bed, not constantly scrolling. I think it's a tool that's useful. It's like the whole conversations about artificial intelligence, AI. I mean, I love a good, you know, dystopian story, you know, as much as the next person. So I mean, there's a little bit of a like, oh, the AI is a little scary, but it's a tool. And I think that if we, you know, we embrace really understanding how we can use it and when to use it and when to put it aside, I think that is really what all of us can approach with that. So.
Yeah, it's a great point. So I'll close this out with one final question, because we talked about food periodically throughout this. So what's the go-to restaurant for you?
Oh, let's see. Depends on what I'm in the mood for and who I'm with. But it's funny. So in Frederick, I do love Dutch's Daughter, which is an old, long-time staple. Their crab bisque is to die for. But from a kind of a newer, you know, standpoint, Firebirds, which I know is kind of more of a chain, but I mean, they do a really good job with service and with steaks and different things and wine selection. But just on kind of the fun side, so growing up in South Jersey, we weren't too terribly far from Ocean City, Maryland, from the shore, as we call it. And Mac and Manco's Pizza, there is nothing better. It's just, they got a handful of locations, and it's not Mac and Manco anymore, it's Manco and Manco, long story, but I've not had anywhere has better pizza. So, and you know, people might want to fight me over that comment, but you know, it's just, and growing up in South Jersey, I mean, pizza, cheesesteaks, soft pretzels, it's, you know, got to be very particular.
So I know we could go on forever.
I know, right?
Is there anything really important that we should talk about before we go? Whether it's about yourself or work or anything else? No,
I think we've covered family, hobbies, work, things like that. You know, I think, you know, I mentioned early on that I keep telling myself it's a marathon, not a sprint. I'm wired where it's my personal expectations for myself. I've had to, it's been an evolution of myself as an adult and as a career person I've had to work on really kind of giving myself grace and not holding myself to a level of expectation that, you know, I'm the only one doing it to myself, and creating stress and creating, you know, anxiety. And it's you know, I think it's something that a lot of us as you know, high performing and successful adults can relate to. But really kind of giving myself that grace, and that how important is that self-care, and how important is it, that moderation of you know, making sure I've got enough time to you know, kind of feed my soul in other ways is so important. So yeah, so
Yeah. Well, Lisa has been a seamless addition to the team. I'm very grateful for your presence here, and we've been able to accomplish quite a bit in your time here in a year. I know I mentioned that the other day, and Lisa kind of perked up and looked at me like, what are we talking about?
I said, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. I've that back to that, like, oh my God, I wish I could do more. So.
I think it goes back to celebrating all those accomplishments along the way, and a reminder we need to do more of it. But love that you're here, and appreciate you being here. Appreciate you giving us the time this afternoon. I know sometimes this is anxiety inducing, but I hope everyone at home enjoyed it. And certainly, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out directly to Lisa. If you have other types of questions, feel free to reach out to myself. So otherwise, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.